My name is Adrian Carter. I'm 52 years old, and 3 days ago I found out that legally, I'm dead. This is not a metaphor or some existential crisis. To the government, to my bank, and most of all to my wife, I am a corpse resting under a tombstone with my name on it, while she enjoys every single cent of my life insurance. Imagine waking up after 2 years of complete darkness, your body stiff and your mind foggy, only to discover that the woman who swore to love you in sickness and in health not only stopped visiting after the 2nd month, but also forged medical reports to have me disconnected and collect a fortune. She already buried me. She already cried in front of an empty coffin. And she already spent part of my life on a man 10 years younger. But she made a technical mistake, a small detail her greed failed to calculate. My heart refused to stop. Now I'm here, watching from the shadows how she lives in my house, how she sleeps in my bed, and how she wastes the money I earned with decades of sweat. She believes the mourning is over, but my return is not to reclaim my life. It's to make sure hers becomes the same hell I was trapped in for the past 2 years. If you enjoy stories where betrayal has consequences and justice arrives without warning, leave a like and subscribe. Here, we share real stories of revenge and lessons that are never forgotten. To understand how I got to this point, you first need to understand who I was before the accident. I wasn't a man of luck. I was a man of discipline. At 52, I had built a solid fortune based on consistent effort and a vision that few people have in the business world. My life was like a Swiss watch, precise, functional, and, apparently, perfect. I owned a logistics company that ran with the precision of a surgeon, and a bank account that allowed me to sleep peacefully. Or so I thought. Emily came into my life when I was 42. She was 15 years younger, a woman with an energy I no longer had, and a smile that, at the time, I interpreted as honesty. It didn't take long for me to fall in love. I felt like the protector, the man who would hand her the world on a silver platter. We got married under a financial agreement that, in theory, protected what was mine. But love makes you careless. Over the years, I gave her access to everything. She was my right hand, the one who managed the household expenses, the one who knew my passwords, and the sole beneficiary of my life insurance policies. And my insurance was no small thing. It was a 7-figure policy, designed so that if anything ever happened to me, she would never have to lift a finger again for the rest of her life. What irony. I was funding my own disappearance. Our relationship looked enviable from the outside. First-class trips, dinners at the finest places, a house that looked more like a modern art museum than a home. I worked 14 hours a day to maintain that standard. I remember how she used to caress my face and tell me to take care of myself, that she never wanted to lose me. Now, when I close my eyes, I can see the coldness behind those gestures. She wasn't protecting the man. She was protecting the investment. The accident happened on a night of heavy rain. I was coming back from an audit at one of my warehouses. A truck lost control. The asphalt was slick, and in the blink of an eye, my car turned into a twisted accordion of metal. The last thing I remember is the smell of gasoline and the metallic taste of blood in my mouth. Then, silence. A silence that lasted 2 years. During that time, according to the medical reports I managed to obtain later, I was in a persistent vegetative state. I was there, but I wasn't. My body was breathing through a machine, my eyes were closed, and my brain was sending signals so weak that the doctors told Emily the chances of me waking up were less than 1%. To science, I was nothing more than an expensive piece of furniture taking up a hospital room. What no one knew is that at 18 months I started to hear. I couldn't move a finger, I couldn't open my eyes, but I could hear. I heard the rustling of the sheets, the constant beeping of the monitor, and occasionally Emily's voice. At first, her words were filled with sadness. She cried beside my bed. But over time, the tone changed. Her visits became shorter. She wasn't talking to me anymore. She was on the phone with someone else while standing in the room. I heard laughter. I heard her planning to remodel the house with the money that would soon be available. I heard her telling someone named Kevin that the brain death declaration process was taking longer than expected, but that her lawyers were already pressuring the hospital. I was trapped inside my own body, listening to my wife compare funeral service prices and rush the legal process to declare me civilly dead. She wasn't waiting for a miracle. She was waiting for a death certificate. Every time she closed the door to my room on her way out, I felt a cold rage growing inside my chest. That rage is what kept me alive. It was the fuel that forced my neurons to reconnect. My mind became a war room. While she was choosing the color of the marble for my grave, I was learning how to move the index finger of my left hand. It took months of mental agony, of sending commands to muscles that refused to respond. She stopped coming completely after 20 months. To her, I no longer existed. She stopped paying for the private clinic and requested that I be transferred to a public care facility. A gray, forgotten place, hoping that nature would finish the job or that an infection would end what the accident had started. It was there, in that place of peeling walls and the smell of cheap disinfectant, that I finally opened my eyes. There were no nurses screaming in joy, no cinematic moment. Just me, alone in the darkness, realizing that the world had forgotten me and that my wife was now a wealthy woman because of my supposed death. Betrayal is not a quick blow. It is a poison administered in small doses until the heart stops beating. In my case, the poison was legal. When I finally regained full consciousness and my vocal cords produced the first rough sound after 2 years of silence, the nurse on duty almost dropped her tray. There was no joy on her face, only absolute confusion. She looked at me as if she were seeing a ghost that refused to leave the world of the living. It was her who, with a mix of pity and fear, delivered the first slap of reality. "Mr. Adrian, your wife. She told us you no longer had brain activity. The documents say you were declared dead 6 months ago." At that moment, the cold I felt wasn't from the clinic's air conditioning. It was the cold of non-existence. My own wife, the woman who used to sleep on my chest, had manipulated 2 corrupt doctors into signing a false report. She took advantage of a minor respiratory complication I had in the 18th month to declare that my brain had permanently shut down. With that paper, she fast-tracked the legal process. She didn't just collect the $3 million life insurance. She also executed my will, sold my shares in the logistics company, and transferred ownership of our country house to a shell company under her mother's name. She erased me. I was a glitch in the system, a dead man who was still breathing. I asked for a mirror. What I saw wasn't me. It was a 52-year-old man who looked 70, with skin clinging to bone and eyes sunken into shadows. But my hands, weak as they were, slowly began to close into fists. The social worker at the public facility, a tired but honest woman, brought me a box with my belongings. It was just a pair of broken glasses and a watch she didn't bother stealing because the strap was destroyed. There was no sign of my phone, my cards, my identity. Emily had made sure to erase every trace of my existence. The worst came a week later, when I managed to convince a young orderly to lend me his phone so I could access my social media. I didn't look for friends. I searched for her. What I found was a gallery of disgrace, pictures of her on a yacht, toasting with champagne, wearing a diamond ring I never bought her. And beside her, a young man, perfect smile, broad shoulders. Kevin, the name I had heard in my nightmares while I was in a coma. They were on the terrace of my house, the one I built with the sweat of my best years. She wrote captions about moving on and new beginnings, while the guy posed wearing my collection of watches. That same afternoon, I tried calling the man I once considered my best friend and business partner. When he heard my voice, he went silent for almost 10 seconds. Then, with a trembling tone, he said, "Adrian, I don't know who you are, but this is a very bad joke. Adrian died 6 months ago. Emily showed us the ashes." He hung up. She hadn't just declared me dead. She had staged a cremation. She handed an urn filled with dust to my friends and family while I was rotting in a charity hospital bed. I felt a humiliation that burned in my throat. I was alive, but I had no name, no money, no home, no friends. My clothes were nothing more than a hospital gown open in the back. I didn't even have enough to pay for a taxi. Emily had taken away even my right to exist as a human being. She erased me from my own life in the cruelest way possible, making sure no one would look for me, because to everyone, I was nothing more than a bitter memory. That night, while the other patients snored or groaned in pain, I lay there staring at the peeling ceiling. I didn't cry. Tears are for those who still expect comfort, and I no longer expected anything from anyone. My love for her died in that moment, replaced by a surgical clarity. She thought she had killed me, but all she really did was remove the distractions. I no longer had to be the protective husband, the successful businessman, or the model citizen. Now, I was just a man with one objective. She wanted my money and my death. I only wanted her to live long enough to watch me strip away every ounce of the happiness she bought with my life insurance. Being expelled from my own home was the final act of her play. The first act of my reality would begin the moment my legs could carry the weight of my hatred. To destroy someone who has already declared you dead, you first have to learn how to move like a ghost. My physical recovery was a process of pure will and pain. Every step I took through the halls of that public hospital was another nail in the coffin of the life Emily believed she had secured. I had no money, but I still had what mattered most, my mind and the knowledge of my own secrets. She made the mistake of underestimating my ability to plan ahead. 3 weeks after waking up, I managed to contact Lawrence. He wasn't a friend. He was my trusted lawyer for matters that never went through the company, a cold man who understood that loyalty is paid in results. When we met at a dirty cafe near the clinic, he went pale. He looked at me as if death itself had just sat down for an espresso. There were no hugs, just a heavy silence as I handed him a piece of paper with a set of coordinates and an access code to a private safety deposit box that wasn't listed in my official records. "Adrian, legally you're a corpse," he said quietly, adjusting his glasses. "Your wife submitted a death certificate signed by 2 experts. She collected the $3 million policy and already liquidated most of your assets." I answered with a calm that unsettled him. "I know, Lawrence. That's why we're not going to the police, not yet. If I come back legally now, she'll just claim it was a medical error, hire the best lawyers, and walk away with half of what she stole in a never-ending divorce. I don't want half. I want her to have nothing, not even her freedom. My plan wasn't to reclaim my life. It was to sabotage hers from the foundation." Lawrence began working in the shadows. While I settled into a small rented apartment using the cash from my safety deposit box, he started tracking Emily's financial movements. That's when we discovered her lover, Kevin, wasn't just an opportunist. He was a gambler buried in debts exceeding $1 million. Emily was using my life insurance money to cover the holes of a man who loved her as much as she loved me, which is to say, not at all. During the following months, I became an invisible observer. Thanks to my old remote accesses that she never thought to change, because dead men don't use computers, I logged into the security cameras of my own house, watching her in my living room, laughing with that man while they toasted to a bright future. Didn't make me angry. It gave me a cold satisfaction. Every luxury they bought, every trip they planned, became another piece of evidence for the fraud case Lawrence was building. But I needed a master stroke. I knew Emily had forged my signature on a stock transfer document a month before my supposed death. That was the weak point. If I could prove that I was in a deep coma on the date of that signature, the entire house of cards would collapse. But I needed the original records from the private clinic, the ones she believed she had destroyed. I brought in an unexpected ally, a former employee of my company that she had fired without compensation as soon as she took control. He still had the master keys to the archive office. One night we broke in and recovered the real nurse's logs, where it clearly stated that she had requested deep sedation to facilitate the process. It wasn't just fraud, it was attempted murder by omission. Patience. That became my keyword. I watched as Kevin convinced Emily to invest $2 million into a supposed cryptocurrency company that, in reality, was a front that Lawrence and I had already identified as a pyramid scheme. I did nothing to stop her. On the contrary, through anonymous intermediaries, I encouraged the investment. I wanted her desperate. I wanted her to watch the money from my death vanish through the hands of her lover. By the 6th month of my secret resurrection, Emily was trapped. Kevin had lost almost all the insurance money in failed investments and gambling. She had started selling my remaining properties at discounted prices just to keep up appearances. It was time. Lawrence prepared the lawsuits for fraud, falsification of public documents, and criminal conspiracy. But we wouldn't send them to her lawyer. We would deliver them in person. My reconstruction wasn't just physical, it was strategic. I learned that a man with nothing left to lose is the most dangerous predator in the world. She thought burying me was the end of her problem, when in reality it was the beginning of her sentence. I was ready for the climax. I was ready to see the look on her face when she realized that the dead sometimes come back to collect their debts with interest. The moment of truth didn't happen in a courtroom. It happened in my own living room, the one I paid for with years of sleepless nights. I chose the night of our wedding anniversary, a date she now celebrated with Kevin, toasting to a freedom that was never theirs. Lawrence and I walked in using a copy of the key she never changed. After all, the dead don't walk through the front door. As I crossed the threshold, the scent of her expensive perfume turned my stomach, but my steps were steady. I found them on the terrace, laughing, surrounded by empty wine bottles. I stayed in the shadows, watching as he caressed her hand, the same hand that signed my brain death sentence. Then I stepped into the light. The silence that followed was the most satisfying sound I have ever heard in my life. Emily dropped her glass. The crystal shattered against the marble, a perfect echo of her world collapsing. Her face went from confusion to absolute horror in 3 seconds. She stood up, staggering, eyes wide, whispering my name as if it were a spell meant to make me disappear. Kevin, the brave lover, froze in place, staring at my emaciated yet imposing figure. "Hello, Emily," I said, my voice sounding like the creak of a tomb opening. "Looks like mourning suited you well." She tried to scream, but no air came out of her lungs. "You're dead. I saw the ashes," she managed to say in a broken whisper. I gave her a cold, sideways smile. Then I gestured to Lawrence, who stepped forward and placed a thick folder on the glass table, filled with original documents, photos of the experts she had bribed, and the real clinic records proving that I was conscious when she ordered me to be disconnected. "I'm not a ghost, Emily. I'm the rightful owner of every cent you've wasted," I continued, stepping closer until I could see the cold sweat on her forehead. "And while you were celebrating my death, I was rebuilding every step of your fraud. The life insurance, the sale of my shares, the forged signature. It's all here, and so are the reports of your friend's gambling debts standing right there." Kevin tried to react, stammering something about rights, but Lawrence cut him off with a single sentence. "There are 2 officers from the Financial Crimes Unit waiting at the door for a signal. If you try to move, the arrest will be immediate, and a lot louder." The man collapsed into the chair, hiding his face in his hands. Loyalty bought with someone else's money always comes with an expiration date. Emily dropped to her knees. She started crying. That same fake cry that once moved me, begging for forgiveness, saying she did it out of desperation, that the doctors had confused her. I crouched down to her level, grabbed her chin, and forced her to look at me. Her eyes searched for the man who used to forgive everything. But all they found was a dark emptiness. "Don't get it twisted," I whispered in her ear. "I didn't come for an apology. I came for my name. First thing tomorrow morning, the insurance company will demand a full reimbursement for fraud. Since you've already spent almost everything, the bank will seize this house, your accounts, even the jewelry you're wearing. You're on the street, Emily, and after that you'll face charges for document forgery and attempted murder." I watched her break completely. The panic of absolute poverty hit her harder than the guilt of betraying me. Seeing her there, begging for mercy while her lover ignored her to save his own skin. That was the poetic justice I needed. There were no blows, no excessive shouting, just the cold precision of a legal system I had set in motion myself. I stood up, adjusted my jacket, and looked around one last time. That house meant nothing to me anymore. I took the collection watch Kevin was wearing, my watch, and handed it to Lawrence as part of his payment. I walked out without looking back, hearing in the distance the sound of sirens approaching to collect the remains of what used to be my life. She wanted a dead man. And that's exactly what she got. A man without feelings who buried her alive, just as she tried to do to me. Today, my name exists again among the living, but the person I was before that accident died permanently in that hospital bed. Legally, I reclaimed my identity. Financially, I managed to save enough to live comfortably for the rest of my days, far from the unnecessary luxuries that once blinded me. Emily wasn't so lucky. The fraud and forgery case was devastating. Since the insurance money no longer existed, her properties were seized, and she ended up serving a sentence that, although it won't give me back the 2 years she stole from me, at least keeps her where she can't harm anyone else. Her lover, Kevin, disappeared the moment the accounts were frozen, leaving her alone with her lawyers and her misery. They say she tries to send me letters from prison asking for forgiveness, but I've never opened a single one. The fire that consumed us left no ashes worth revisiting. I've learned that loyalty is a currency few people know how to mint, and that love sometimes is nothing more than a poorly written contract we accept out of loneliness. I'm not looking for a new wife, nor for friends who swear they'd die for me. Now I value silence, the breeze against my face, and the certainty that no one has the power to extinguish my light as long as I choose to keep breathing. Betrayal took 2 years of my life, but it gave me a clarity most men never reach, the ability to see people for what they do, not what they say. I hold no grudges because resentment is a heavy burden, and I've already carried the weight of the earth over my name for far too long. I simply accepted reality and acted accordingly. When I look back, I don't see a tragedy. I see a necessary purge. Life has a strange way of testing our endurance, and I passed the hardest test of all. Waking up from the coma was a medical miracle, but reclaiming my dignity was an act of personal justice. Now I walk down the street and no one knows who I am, and that's exactly how I want it. I am a man who came back from death to set his world in order, and who, after closing the final door, finally found peace in the solitude of his own victory. Sometimes, the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's watching life collect its debts. If this story hit you as hard as it hit me living it, leave a like and tell me in the comments what you would have done. And if you're not subscribed yet, turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the next stories.